What is the essence of the concept?
Black people, Black God. That's the essence of the concept.
Wow.
Rastafari is the herald for Ethiopia because it tells the story of Ethiopia to the rest of the world.
Rastafari is often misunderstood.
But at its core, it's a liberation movement tied to Ethiopia.
Spiritual and political awakening. Our guest, Janelle, breaks down how Rastafari ambassadors have carried Ethiopia's story across the globe.
Identity is such a loaded concept, especially for us as the people that were taken away. Part of coming home to Ethiopia, to the African continent in general, is a reclamation of that identity. 80 to 85% of countries in the world were colonized by European powers. When everyone else lost it, Ethiopia held on to something that gave the rest of us hope.
Who can carry on this legacy?
I 100% believe we have that. The fear is that Africa would become the next superpower. Nobody wants to see us at the front. One of the things that I've realized about Ethiopia is Ethiopia is a warrior's country. You must know how to stand up for yourself. You must know how to assert yourself, understand what's your position. What do you stand for? And if you're going to be in Ethiopia, you too have to become a warrior.
This concept of actually bringing that Africa, contributing to that, do we have what it takes to bring that? Janelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Abraham.
All right. It's a great surprise today because I was thinking I would meet someone who would tell me something about being Jamaican American and living in Ethiopia, but I am about to learn a lot of things about Africa, Jamaica, and different other things. Tell us about yourself, first of all.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. I will let you know a little bit about myself before we start. I have been living in Ethiopia for the last 14 years, but originally I was born in America to Jamaican immigrant parents. So I'm a first-generation American, receiving birthright citizenship, which unfortunately it looks like the United States is trying to undo. But so I grew up there in Miami, Florida. And then when I was about 31 years old, decided to relocate to Ethiopia. And ever since then, I've just been here learning the culture, enjoying the hospitality of the people, and fully immersed in what I think is one of the best civilizations on earth.
Amazing, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about identity, and I would think that someone coming to Ethiopia, I wouldn't care about what I can encounter in the country, but really spending all those years in Ethiopia while you have all the opportunities in the US and other places.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the details of it. Hey, what is behind that?
That's deep.
Mm-hmm.
That's a deep question. When we're talking about the identity, identity is such a loaded concept, especially for us. As the people that were taken away, because many of the Africans that were able to remain on the continent, they have concepts of who they are, their background, their language, their tribal history, their music, their food, their dance. But for us who were taken away, we lost that information about who we are. We were able to maintain our identity through our DNA, but not through our collective consciousness. So for me, part of coming home to Ethiopia and to the African continent in general is a reclamation of that identity. Maybe not in its full and authentic and most original state, but the history of Ethiopia and Ethiopia being able to maintain its independence against oppression and not be colonized and being victorious in holding their identity and their pride and their country and culture. I think that for people like myself who have lost a lot of that information about their history, Ethiopia does something to restore confidence in oneself and abilities as an African person. Where as a colonized person, which Ethiopians don't really understand because they've never been colonized people lost an identity, but they also lost a sense of self, a sense of really having autonomy and sovereignty. And a lot of their identity is based on what the colonizers told them about themselves. So Ethiopia repairs that, being around people who control their reality, that build modern cities from African minds and African concepts and African structures, and is one of the leading civilizations and fastest growing developing economies in Africa. It does something, to restore a sense of confidence and a sense of identity. For those of us who have lost that, Ethiopia does a great thing for us in being able to restore and fill the gaps of those missing pieces. Yeah.
I mean, talking about this, not being colonized and having that autonomy, I had this encounter discussing the issue, the point with friends, and we tend to take it as nothing. Like in Ethiopia, young people, anyone you meet around, especially around
taking it for granted.
We take it for granted.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand what makes that special until I met people very recently and understand the whole essence of it. So do you want to take me to some part of it and what intricate nature or detail it has? Or is there anything that I should understand to fully comprehend what it means to be, not to be colonized?
Yes. That of all the nations in the world, colonization has ravaged the majority of them. I would say 80 to 85% of countries in the world were colonized by European powers at some point in their history. And the legacy of colonization was very damaging for us, like what I said with our identity, but it also relegated us to servitude. Yeah. So coming out of that without filling the gap of who we really were, we've only been able now to kind of regain, even with the civil rights era and independent countries through the 60s, the wave of independence. I don't think Ethiopians fully grasp what they were able to hold on to that everyone else lost. And when everyone else lost it, Ethiopia held on to something that gave the rest of us hope. And not only hope, but something to look towards and say, we can be like them. We can restore ourselves to that level. Because if we didn't have Ethiopian kings and Ethiopian queens and Ethiopian kingdoms and Ethiopian people holding on to all their tribes and cultures, and we came here and everyone was just speaking Italian, where would the sense of African sovereignty and identity, where would that have been kept? Only in museums. So this is what Ethiopia really does for us as those who are outside that. And, to be honest with you, we didn't grow up learning about Ethiopia. Ethiopia was something that was brought to our attention through years and years of struggle. You had the history of Ethiopianism goes back to the 17th century. And our counterparts in history, the earlier civilization, slaves and their descendants, they started to look to Ethiopia as their realm of hope. Their realm of identity, their realm of sovereignty. And there's a vast history as it relates to what we were able to gather from that historical narrative. If we didn't have that, I think that it would have taken us a lot longer, even for African countries to gain their independence. It would have taken a lot longer for us to find our African selves inside. So Ethiopia was able to hold on to the full sense of what it meant to be African, but not just from a place of in the tribe, but at the very top power governmental structure that was the Ethiopian government, running yourself, controlling yourself. No other African country can say that. They're being controlled by the British, or they're being controlled by the French, or they're being controlled by the Portuguese. But Ethiopia can say that they are controlling their own country. Yeah. That for the rest of the world, for the rest of the Black world, that's one of the most important stories being told.
Amazing.
Yeah.
When you talked about the whole thing, I was thinking about Rastafarianism and if it has anything to do with autonomy, independence, Ethiopia. Tell me about that.
Yes, absolutely. Rastafari is a Black liberation struggle. It's a Black liberation movement. It's about the liberation of not just ourselves from colonialism, but the freedom of our minds, the freedom of our hearts, the return to nature, the return to naturalism, the return to our own way of life. I think because especially coming out of Jamaica, it wasn't something that was secular. It was something that came out of the faith, that came out of the church, and the restoration of not just Black consciousness of African history and African culture, but also are regaining who we naturally are without the interference of white people, and what does that look like? What does that seem like? How can we truly live free? Rastafari moving from the cities into the forests, into the farms, into the villages. Why? Because that's where they were able to live an independent life where they could be themselves.
I mean, the understanding we have of the whole concept of Rastafarianism and what it represents actually is really limited to relating it to having a dreadlock and being free people or something like that. So what would you say is the essence of it? I mean, if someone very new to the concept should understand it, what is the essence of the concept?
The essence of the concept is Black people, Black God. That's the essence of the concept.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Black people, Black God.
Amazing. Amazing. I never understood it to be that way. Okay, great. There is Shashimani in Ethiopia.
Yes.
We are in Africa. We are in Ethiopia. We have a confusion. I have at least a confusion, and we kind of take the whole, the whole concept, the whole movement as something that belongs to Ethiopia, that is ours. So we take it for granted. Should we take the whole thing for granted? For example, this is about Black empowerment. This is about empowering our independence and the whole thing that you mentioned earlier.
And a little further, we can take it a little further because what Rastafari has done for Ethiopia is it has told the story. Rastafari is the herald for Ethiopia because it tells the story of Ethiopia to the rest of the world and has held Ethiopia in the highest regard so that the rest of the world will never forget Ethiopia. That's what we've been able to accomplish for the country of Ethiopia and the culture of Ethiopia. We're ambassadors.
All right.
Yeah, we're like ambassadors for Ethiopia, whether it's in Jamaica or it's in China or it's in Japan or it's in France or it's in Russia or it's in America or it's in South America, Brazil. Wherever you go and you find a Rasta, the Rasta is telling the people about the glory of Ethiopia. Yeah.
All right. Preparing for this interview, I came across with terminologies like CARICOM.
Yes.
Reparation. And there is another word that I will mention later, but what are the two things?
Well, CARICOM is Caribbean community.
All right.
It's what it is. It's essentially like the African Union of the Caribbean.
All right.
So it's a regional community of Caribbean states, and they, at this moment, are leading the charge for reparations. Reparations is a concept that goes back to what happened to us and the restoration of the issues that have affected us as a result of the historical transatlantic slave trade and the people that our ancestors who were taken away and kidnapped by the Europeans and sold into slavery, and then the effects as their descendants that has had on us generationally. So CARICOM has created a commission that works on the reparations agenda, and they've created a 10-point plan that goes through the different facets of loss and how the repair can be done, what kind of justice we deserve as the people that are ultimately still feeling the effects of these atrocities. It didn't just go away because slavery ended. We have generations of people that are still affected by what happened to our ancestors. And so what reparations is, it's a demand for restitution. The same way that the Japanese received, the Israelis received, even Ethiopia received from Italy. These are things that we must challenge. And up until now, we haven't received.
So do you think that will happen anytime soon? Or is there any entity that is actually listening to this and thinking that it is justified to actually compensate for whatever happened?
Well, I think that what we need to do is make the case. Yeah, because we can't just expect that people are looking to give money. It's like a criminal committing a crime. And when criminals commit crimes, they get away with it. They're not looking to turn themselves in, are they? No, criminals are happy to get away with crimes. And so the only way that criminals can face the effects of their crimes or the consequences of their crimes is when they go to court. So I think at some point we have to take that approach. We're not there yet, obviously, because what we're talking about is not just a Caribbean issue. We're talking about the larger Black diaspora, the Black world, essentially, wherever we were taken as slaves. The global Black diaspora is who's being represented. So what CARICOM is doing is they're leading the unprecedented charge for the global Black diaspora as a confederation of states. So they're supported not only in their institutional framework, but they're supported by their prime ministers, their ambassadors, their local governments. As a matter of fact, Prime Minister Mia Mottley, she's at the helm of the reparations agenda for CARICOM.
Who are we asking that? I just want to understand.
Oh, you want to know who?
The whole thing.
The who?
The who part is there.
Well,
are we expecting the white people from Britain or other countries, maybe Portugal or other countries that colonized Black Africa or the Caribbean to pay money or to pay whatever? What generation?
Yeah, why not? Does it necessarily have to come in the form of cash? It should, but that's not the only form that it can take. But we have to make them answerable. Because if there's a precedence being set for all these other people around the world and all these other cultures and all these other communities to get reparations for what has happened to them, the case studies for reparations are endless. What makes us any less worthy of receiving restitution for what has happened to our people at the hands of England, at the hands of Portugal, at the hands of France, at the hands of Belgium, at the hands of Denmark, at the hands of the Netherlands? Why at the hands of Italy? Why shouldn't we demand justice and restitution for the crimes committed against our people when everyone else can do it and everyone else can get reparations?
Are we ready? I mean, to deal with the details, the intricacies, the details that are required in there? For example, we can have people like Marcus Garvey, very empowered people, empowered Black intellectuals who can deal with what the law can provide, bring. But now there is poverty that Black people trying to overcome everywhere, be it in Caribbean countries or islands, be it in Africa.
But where did that poverty come from? Like if we're honest, yeah, poverty is institutionalized oppression. It's not something that happens as just a result of people's laziness or because there's not enough jobs in the economy. There are institutional and systematic issues that the root cause of which was colonization, slavery, and the systematic oppression that was created in the law that held our people back for hundreds of years. And some of those laws are still in place today. Now, when you say, are we ready for that? The CARICOM Reparations Commission was founded in 2013. So this is not a new initiative. This is just an initiative that is starting to gain traction, and their agenda is accelerating because they are ready. They were recently in the UK meeting with Town Hall, meeting with the Institute of the Commonwealth, because there's groundwork that has to be laid. And not just in England, but all over. But primarily the reason why CARICOM is beginning with England is because England is one of the premier perpetrators of colonization throughout the world. So we have to begin somewhere. Yeah. So I think that this is a good time.
Amazing. So what is the ideal Caribbean islands or African countries after getting restitution or after being hurt? What kind of country are you thinking, or what kind of continent are you thinking will emerge out of that? I mean, a country like the Western world, educated, empowered, or something?
Yes, of course. But okay, look at Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Let's look at how Ethiopia has developed in the last 2-3 years. Yeah. Like rapid accelerated development. So much so that one of the premiers from Ghana was recently here and has gone back to her country using Ethiopia as a model for development and saying, how did they do that? Yeah. You have already set a precedence here in Ethiopia for what a modern Africa is. Now, where Africa is right now, it's being pillaged. Its resources are being basically stolen. Yeah. There's no frameworks in place to protect the land or the people or the rights. There's a lot of interference in government and in politics. So say you were to remove all of that, all of those issues, and just give Africa a fair chance with all of the resources, all of the technology, all of the education, all of the money that it needs to develop, what would happen? Yeah. And there the fear is that Africa would become the next superpower. So is it going to be easy for us to get what we want and what we deserve? No, because nobody wants to see us at the front. If you've always been in the back, when you become strong enough and mighty enough to challenge them in the front, then that's when the challenges really start. Because it's a threat. Our power is a threat to Europe. Our confederation is a threat to Europe. And what we've done to lean into that is we've been given them the power to dictate to us our paths of development. So we have to cut those strings and we have to take our power back. Yeah, if we really want to develop, we can use Ethiopia as a model for what Africa development should be like.
All right.
Yeah.
You have many hats.
I do.
And one of those many hats is as an author. And
I tell stories.
You tell stories, you're an educator and a lot of things. Tell us about being an author and what that entails, and what do you want to actually tell the world or the Black communities living in Ethiopia, in Africa, and elsewhere in the world through that?
One, the beauty of Africa, especially since we're not really taught about modern Africa in the West. There's a gap in African history. Generally, we're not really given a proper perspective on what Africa is like in today's scope. You know, we're still seeing the National Geographic and the safaris and the elephants and the wide open plains and the tribes that have, you know, limited clothing attire and, you know, these kinds of things. That's the exposure that we get. So for me, I want to use the platform of authorship and storytelling to reimage Africa for the consciousness of people that are in the West. You know, it's more than a divide that's by an ocean, you know? There's also the media divide, where there are people on that side of the world are telling a different story about Africa than the one we come here and learn. And so it's important that we show people the truth and use Africa as in the same context that we use Rome. You know, you look at the ancient movies that all the modern Sparta and these glorifying all of these ancient Roman empires, and yet we can't have those same stories about Gundar. You know, we can't have those same stories about the Solomonic dynasty and Menelik or Tewodros, or, you know, where's our Camelot? You know, where are our heroes that are sourced in Africa, not in ancient Greek mythology? You know, so that's the storytelling that we need to do now, is to give the future in Africa's children and the children of our ancestors more to look forward to from their race, from their people. You know, right now, everybody's trying to be like the superheroes and the mythical creatures and, you know, and then you look at the stories they tell about themselves, and they have their Queen Victorias and they have their King Arthurs and they have their this, and we all know their names and we know who they are. Why? Because they've been telling their story. They've been telling their story, but they didn't tell our story. We're cannibals and we're ignorant and we don't have any development and we can't do anything and we need white people to teach us. And these are the stories they tell us about ourselves. So as an author, I want to reshape that and give our stories the proper place that they deserve.
How long do you think will that take us?
Well, I think for me, it's already started. Right. I'm not the first. You know, we have all kinds of stories coming out. We have our directors that are directing for our people and for our culture. The Ethiopian story, we have, you know, people that are telling the story of Ethiopia in comics and in film, and there's all these fanfare around Ethiopia now. So it's already started. So we're just continuing. But I mean, I can devote my entire life to that. And hopefully the next generation will do the same and take the baton and continue. Yeah.
I like to be really optimist about the African narrative and telling our stories to the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's a must.
The glory of Africa, the glory of Ethiopia, the glory of the Black people. But something that holds me back is thinking about the resource that requires to actually inculcate that story to the mind of the rest of the world. Because I believe it has taken several decades, maybe, I don't know, thousands of years for the rest of the world, the Western countries now, to tell their stories. Now their story is really believed to be the story of the world. But we're thinking about it now. We understand woke, not in that sense, but in the sense of understanding what we deserve and what stories should be told about Africa or Black people.
Yeah.
But I'm skeptical about the resource part of it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
I think that there's plenty of resources out there for these types of projects. I think that there's anywhere that we want to put our money, we'll put our money. But we're living in a capitalist society. Yeah. So there we know that there's a market for it, and the Black dollar is very strong. It's probably, if you were to combine all of Africa and all of the global South, the diaspora included, the sixth region, and what we're called at the African Union, the Black diaspora is called or referred to as the sixth region. We're one of the mightiest nations on earth, GDP. We have unlimited resources. And the reason why I think division is such a big part of what we have to experience is because if our resources were to really be combined, but you saw what Ethiopia did when they combined their resources. They built the GERD, you know? So we are only as limited as we believe ourselves to be, you know? We can pull together and we can accomplish many things. I'm sure that there's a future for Ethiopia that will involve the ICOB at a larger scale.
All right.
You know, but it's the ICOB that has built Ethiopia. You know, cooperative economics. It's one of the core principles of Kwanzaa. Yeah. It's an ICOB. You know, that's how we built our civilization. So we have to return. We have to stop using the European institutions as the bedrock of what a future looks like or how a future can be attained, because our ancient Ethiopian and African principles are equally as valuable and can do just as much, if not more, and make us no longer dependent on them. Yeah.
I like that a lot. I mean, it's not that often that you hear people telling you, you can do this and you can do that and accomplish something big. You hear people saying this kind of things, but you think, where can I get the money to do that?
Yeah.
I mean, there is this limiting belief coming from ourselves, or coming from the people that we trust, we love.
Yeah.
So having people like yourself and telling us these kind of things, that it's possible to achieve it, it means a lot. It's big. I want to take you to the US. I want to take you to that developed world.
Okay. I can speak a little bit about that.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, you'll find people in Ethiopia or maybe all of Africa wanting to go there and, I mean, face the hardship, and they have a utopia or some kind of
perception,
world,
right?
A perception that they think that the US is, or those countries in the West are, that they would overcome their problems and they will be educated, they will have all the knowledge they want, or they will have all the finance they want. So they will come back to Africa and will live the life they deserve, or the life they imagine to live. You've been there. Now you're here for about 14 years in Ethiopia.
Yes.
What made you decide that way?
Whew. Well, I was asked this question the other night. One of our CARICOM ambassadors was here visiting, and we had dinner with her at the CARICOM Nationals in Ethiopia. And she asked us to tell our stories the same way you're asking me to tell mine now. So we went around the table and everyone told theirs. So I'm going to repeat a little bit of my story, the one that I shared the other night. I was about 14 years old, and I was a student that always took my studies very seriously. So we were given a project, and the project was that we had to write a book report on a nonfiction book. So my father had this small library in our house, and I went to the bookshelf and I saw on the bookshelf the binds, you just see the binds of the books. And one of the binds was my favorite color. So innocently, just because I love this color. I pulled it off of the shelf. And it turned out to be the autobiography of Marcus Garvey. And so I read that book. And it changed my life at the age of 14. Opened my eyes, not only to the concept of knowing who I was, accepting who I was as a Black person, conquering all limiting beliefs about what our people are capable of. But it also gave me a path back to Africa and put that recognition that I'm not really home. This is not really where I belong. I don't really belong here. I'm out of place. But where do I belong? I belong in Africa. And it was at that moment that I knew I would return to Africa one day. Now, why did I choose Ethiopia? Well, like we've been talking about, Ethiopia is uncolonized. And when you're searching for yourself, when you're searching for something that you lost, that's a deep inner drive. Have you ever been lost before?
Not really.
You never been lost on the street trying to find someone's house?
That lost.
Lost.
Several times. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're lost, you have this urge. You have a deep, it's not like you just give up and like, oh, I'm lost. No. When you're lost, you have a deep, deep inner urge to find what you're looking for. You have to ask people. You have to find directions. You have to go back and make sure you're going in the right direction. So many different things, but everything is about being found. Yeah. And I think that for me, in my deep, deep search, that you don't even know what you're searching for because you don't know what you've lost. You just know there's something there and something's missing. So when you're searching for that thing that you lost, that's deep research. That's reading. That's devotion. That's prayer. That's like asking God to lead you in a dark place where there is no light. And when God hears you, He does answer. Yeah, on this path. That's what I found. Being in Ethiopia was like God's answer. That's what Ethiopia is for me. The deep calling, the deep cry that my soul went through in that state of being lost. When God heard me, He led me here to find what I'd been missing. And that's why I'm in Ethiopia, if I have to be honest.
Wow.
But if I'm going to give you the secular version, is Ethiopia, the history. I'm in love with this country. I'm in love with this history. I'm in love with the culture. I'm in love with Ethiopia. I love everything about it. You would think I just came yesterday. I still want to discover. I still want to unearth. I still want someone's grandmother to adopt me and teach me how to make injera and kineto and tala. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just feel like I just want to learn as much as I can. And in learning, it's like the soul is satiating itself. The soul is devouring and it's getting that nourishment that we never had. I've never had the type of nourishment from belonging that I've had in Ethiopia ever, not even in Jamaica. Ethiopia has given me that full belly of belonging that I've never experienced ever in my life. Yeah, so.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really great. I mean, I saw people be passionate about Ethiopia and tell this story of the imagination and the reality of Ethiopia they have. They tell it, it's perfect, but the way you actually put it, Oh, steep.
Mm.
I mean, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's really the depth of what we lost. I think that we
Yeah.
can't escape. We can't ever really explain why we're here
Mhm.
without laying the foundation of what we lost.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that leads me to think about the other word that I was about to call, but prefer to call it right now and put it for later. That is repatriation.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Mm.
Hmm.
Repatriation is a movement.
Mhm.
Repatriation is a powerful, powerful movement that didn't just happen today, obviously. Repatriation is how the country of Liberia was founded. You have the Creole people of Sierra Leone. You have in Ghana a huge repatriation movement that's being run by the Ghanaian government. There's repatriation happening all over the countries of Africa and throughout the world. Repatriation for us is a sense of returning. Yeah, returning back to our homeland, returning back to our forefathers' lands that we were taken from unwillingly. And at the moment, Ethiopia is one of the leading countries because we have a community here, Shashimani, that many don't know the history of. So I'll share a little bit about that. The history of Shashimani and the relationship of Ethiopia with the rest of the world goes back to 1937, when His Imperial Majesty asked his physician, Dr. Malaku Bayan, to start a group, like an NGO, a charitable group, to help raise funds that can then be used in the aid relief during the Italian War. So Malaku Bayan founded the Ethiopian World Federation. They raised a lot of money and gained a lot of support throughout the world, throughout the Black world, to assist Ethiopia. Following that, the war was won. His Majesty was restored to his throne. Victory Day, May 5th, 1941, Haile Selassie re-enters Ethiopia. But the Ethiopian World Federation continued to exist, continued to open charters. Black people were very drawn to Ethiopia, the message of Ethiopia, and Ethiopia as a symbol of Black sovereignty and independence in the world. So in 1948, as a show of gratitude, Haile Selassie granted land to the Ethiopian World Federation in Shashimani. He gave 500 hectares of land, which was 20 gashas, something like that. And it was for 500 families to return to Ethiopia through the Ethiopian World Federation and resettle and help to develop Ethiopia. So that's the historical context of the Shashimani land grant. Now, what most people don't realize is that the Ethiopian World Federation was not a Rastafarian organization. It's an organization similar to the UNIA that attracted Black professionals.
UNIA?
The UNIA, which was the organization that was founded by Marcus Garvey.
Oh,
so
right.
It was previous to, and they overlapped in some senses in terms of, timeline. But the UNIA was an organization that founded by Marcus Garvey, the United Negro Improvement Association. And what their basic premise was to bring Black professionals into a collective. And then they began initiatives. They would have parades, they would have nurses' days, health fairs, choirs. There was a lot of programming around Harlem at that time, which was kind of like the hub for the Black Renaissance. Yeah. And so the EWF was also there. The Ethiopian World Federation was also founded in Harlem, New York. So Haile Selassie then, the Ethiopian World Federation also attracted Black professionals, from all over the world. So the Ethiopian World Federation and Rastafarianism were introduced in 1954 when His Majesty's international organizer, the international organizer of the Ethiopian World Federation, Mamie Richardson, was an opera singer who came to Ethiopia and performed for His Majesty. And she was given an assignment, because there wasn't anyone coming to occupy the land that Haile Selassie had given 6 years previously. So one of her mandates was to go down to Jamaica and meet the liberators, and the independent Black thought and the groups there, and introduce them to this idea of Ethiopian World Federation and Shashimani land grant. So this is when Rastafarianism began to hold on to the idea of returning to Africa through the vehicle of the Shashimani land grant. Yeah, but the early pioneers were not Rastafarians. The early pioneers were members of the Ethiopian World Federation. So the first pioneering couple were Ines. I can't remember their names right now, but they weren't even from Jamaica. Yeah, they were from another Caribbean island. I believe they were from Bermuda. I think so. Nevertheless, repatriation has a long history. And what it means for us now, especially as it's becoming more prevalent and more in demand, and it's no longer a Rastafarian pursuit. It's the pursuit of Black people all across the world, from all walks of life, from all stations of life, wanting to return to a sense of belonging. And repatriation being able to open that door for them and offer them that vehicle, that pathway through which they can become Africans again.
So we're not thinking about instant economic empowerment or financial.
That's repatriation. Repatriation is different than reparations, but the same, because repatriation is one of the 10-point plans for the CARICOM. It's number 3. So it's a facet of reparations. So in order for us to fully realize reparations, a lot of things have to be addressed. Yeah, a full apology, the return of cultural artifacts, African knowledge systems, psychological rehabilitation, repatriation, economic and infrastructural development. So there are quite a bit of things. The return of cultural artifacts, So there's the repatriation is just one of many restorative things that must happen.
All right. Yeah. So thinking about Africans or people living in different parts of the world coming to Africa and trying to experience, independence and autonomy and all those things, I think about young people and whether or not this young people understands what all that is, and if they can really be willing to come to Africa. Because we were talking about, you've been telling me about the narrative of what the media is telling the whole world about Africa, what Africa is, a representation of Africa. For example, if you see a documentary produced by one of those Western media houses, it's about a wide land where you can see a hyena running,
grass huts, and
all kind of things.
Or poverty, or war torn, or
So young people have access to media, and that way they have a portrait of Africa in their mind. You cannot take that away immediately. So, do you really believe these young people, can come to Africa or can be willing to come to Africa and
develop? Absolutely, because it's already happening. Yeah, it's already happening. Maybe as a trickle now, but the wave, the tide that is sweeping Africa cannot be stayed. Yeah, Africa's the future. Everything is happening. The re-education. And I think one of the best things that's ever happened to Africa is social media. Have you ever met Wodemaya? He's a Ghanaian YouTuber and social media content creator. He's been in Ethiopia.
Yeah, definitely.
And he's been all over the place. Wow, this place is amazing. I think we need more storytellers.
Absolutely.
Because if we're relying on the traditional media houses to tell our story, they're always going to skew it a certain way. They're going to minimize. No one's reporting on the GERD in the United States. CNN isn't saying, hey, look what Ethiopia has done. They only want to talk about the conflicts They only want to talk about the divisions in the country. They want to paint a picture that Africa is unstable, lacking development. Why? So that they can sneak in the back and take everything for themselves. Because that's why else? Who do we see the majority of people coming here? Who's developing the most? Yeah. But they discourage us. But they're here and they're developing. So I think for young people, learning and getting the right exposure to what's actually happening, it's enticing. Yeah, because there's so much opportunity. Africa is like bursting at the seams with opportunity right now. You look at the intra-Africa trade, like there's so many things that are just on the horizon for that growth. If you can find your way through the maze of bureaucracy, there's so much opportunity here. So is that being publicized enough? You should put some more of that on your podcast.
I'm trying my best.
Let the young people see, that the next generation is going to be the millionaires, the new billionaires of the world. They're going to be the new Dangatis of the world. It's just about tapping into the boom that's going on right now. Yeah. I
want to know more about the educator you. Learned a lot about this passionate enthusiast about Ethiopia and Africa and the empowerment of the Black people. But there is also another heart, the heart that you're wearing, the educator. Tell me about that, and what are you doing in that regard in Ethiopia?
Well, at this time, I would say that my passion a little bit has shifted. Yeah. So I'm educating, but I'm educating more around who my community is, the value that we add to Ethiopia. Recently, we had a CARICOM community come and had one of the largest meetings between CARICOM heads of state and the CARICOM community here, the CARICOM Nationals in Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian dignitaries and diplomats, and as guests of the Prime Minister, we're afforded, beautiful reception in Shashimani. But on the back of that, there's a lot of public education that must happen, and so I think I've stepped out of the classroom with children.
All right.
And stepped into public education. So as a matter of fact, just this coming Saturday, we're going to be having a public event at the Ottawa Victory Memorial Museum, where we're going to be having a dialogue with one of the ambassadors from Barbados to CARICOM, who's also on the CARICOM Reparations Commission, Ambassador David Kamishong, who was also here on the September delegation event. So he will be speaking on the legacy of the Barbadian repatriates that came in the 1930s for Haile Selassie's coronation and decided to stay and open a school and develop a lot of things for Ethiopia. He's going to be speaking about them and the global reparations agenda. We're going to have an address by the Global Black Center and also the Institute of Foreign Affairs. So what we're going to be talking about is reparations in the modern era. Yeah. So we're having a dialogue about what does it mean? What does reparations mean today? Yeah. For us now.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
amazing.
Yeah.
Diaspora. Somebody told me, I think I invited that person to the podcast, and we were talking about the impact of the diaspora, especially in the Ethiopian diaspora. And they were saying they don't like the term diaspora because
I've heard that before.
Really?
Yeah.
So CARICOM is there. It's doing all these things, and at the heart of it, there is diaspora. How do you measure? How do you gauge the impact that the diaspora living in different part of the world has
on Africa?
On Africa.
Well, I think what they use primarily to measure the impact is remittances.
Yeah.
Remittances tells quite the story. So As far as the African diaspora and African continental Africans working together and building, I think that that's pretty much how a lot of like grassroots organizing and grassroots development has been happening. You know, families have been sending money from abroad so that people can build homes and develop communities and develop themselves through education and other means. So you see that there has been growth. Yeah. There is more growth to be had. What does it mean to reconnect the diaspora with Africa intentionally? Yeah. I think that that's the groundwork that the young people now can begin to envision, you know, because we, as older people that have seen quite a bit, you know, our eyes are not as fresh as they used to be. You see, I'm wearing my glasses. I wear my glasses now. My vision's no longer 20/20, you know? So I can only tell you what I've seen.
All right.
You know? But if someone shows me something new, I might not even really understand the concept. Like, for example, Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, you know? So the world is open, and the diaspora have the opportunity to bring back so much technology and experience that can inform Africa's future and the future of African development in a mainstream way, so that it's keeping in step and even capable of surpassing older or not as fully developed countries, you know?
Great. I'm so glad that you mentioned Bitcoin, and I was the whole time you were talking about Africa, Ethiopia, the diaspora, CARICOM, I was thinking about social media and young people of Africa and people living in all parts of the world. They use social media, and there is this negative impact of social media. And the concept of coming to Africa, helping Africa develop, or actually contributing to the development of these nations will take resilience, sustainable thinking about a continent in different ways, comprehending what our problem is. Do you really believe that I'm not being skeptical about young people living, Black people living everywhere in the world, but I have this concern.
All right, let's hear it.
Yeah, so our attention is really limited. And we think about something that gives us pleasure for the time being, especially the young people. We can talk about what is behind it and the justification for giving different devices, gadgets for these young people everywhere. That could be another point to discuss about or to talk about in other times. But I have this fear. Everything you're telling me about is great. We need that development. We need that passion. We need that love.
Yeah.
We need to be together. We need to unite.
Yeah.
But we depend on the power, the knowledge, the expertise, the skill of young people. Do we have that foundation? Are we really working on building young people who can carry on this legacy or this concept of actually bringing that Africa, contributing to that beautiful Black community? Do we have what it takes to bring that?
I 100% believe we have that. I think Black genius is very organic. I think there's no stopping us. So I actually have more of an opposite perspective of you because I feel like there's no stopping us. The only thing that can stop us is ourselves. You know? No matter what's happening in the world, no matter what we face, we always come out on top. Ethiopia is a perfect sign of that. Always coming out on top, you know, especially right now. Now, I think what happens is there's that transition between the past and the future. You see, the transition between the past and the future is similar to what we saw in 1974 when the Derg took over Ethiopia. It was the transition between the past and the future, but it wasn't pretty. Yeah, it was challenging. It was difficult. It was hard. And not only was it hard, but people lost a lot of things, including lives in the process. Thankfully, we're not there anymore. Yeah. But we know that there's always going to be a challenge with transitioning from the past to the future. How much the past supports the future is going to make all the difference. So can the leaders support the young people? Can they put enough resources and capability and training and behind them to bolster the future? You know, when you look back in the past, as much as Ethiopia values education today, there was a time that Haile Selassie had to pay parents to send their children to school as an incentive to educate them, you know? So are we really ready to invest in the future? And to invest in the future is to invest in young people. Now, you also have to make sure that while you're investing in young people, that progress must be moral. Yeah, we don't want to adopt the ways of the West just because we value their educational process. Because a lot comes with that, you know, historically and otherwise.
All right.
Yeah, so we want to.
Great. But if you can touch on the attention deficiency part of it.
Ooh.
I mean, you're using social media.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the Ghanaian young person coming to Ethiopia and showing what Ethiopia has to offer the rest of the world, and whatever developments is happening in here. That's great. At the same time, the same device, the same gadget that he uses to portray Africa or Ethiopia in a positive light, people use it for
all kinds of things.
Yeah. So I'm really skeptical about that point.
Yeah.
I mean, not fully skeptical because we have difficulties, we have challenges that we need to overcome. We understand that, but it's not everyone.
No.
So what do you think about that? Someone was suggesting here, like we need to have our own outlet. When we think about media, social media, the social media of the rest of the world cannot be a social media for Africa. When we think about TikTok, Africa needs to have its own kind of TikTok that can tell the narrative, the story, the history of Africa.
You mean it's too much exposure?
Absolutely.
I understand. I mean, honestly, I can tell you my personal philosophy as a mother.
All right.
I can tell you my personal philosophy as a human.
Okay.
But if I'm looking at it from the social scientist perspective, there's no going back. It's already here. You know, it's like the television or the microwave or electricity. Like it's an invention relevant to the times. And where one time there was only light bulbs for some people, and maybe you only had one TV in the whole neighborhood, now everyone can walk around with a TV in their hand. That's the nature of technology. Yeah. But it's how do we use it that determines its value. Yeah? Because you can spend too much time doing anything to your detriment. Yeah. You know? But it's up for parents. If we're talking about children that are minors, I think it's up to parents to set parameters for them, you know, but once you're able to, you know, make your own decisions and have your own life, then you have to have your own self-discipline when it comes to what you're exposed to. How do we make social media a valuable tool for the society as much as it can be a detrimental tool for society? We have to find more value in what it can be if we create the right infrastructures for it. Right. Yeah, I think that that's something that we can re-envision, you know. Do we need more outlets? Yeah. Why not? You know, why not? It's like saying we only need one television station. You know, we only need EBC. We don't need anyone else. You know, if we took that idea, then there wouldn't be no EBS or Kana or Fana or Arts or, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's the same idea. This is just a platform. It's what we do with it that matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I
agree. I completely agree to that. So you don't strike me as someone who likes talking about challenges. But,
I do. It makes you think that. I live them every day.
Tell me about those.
Challenges. Be more specific. What kind of challenges are we talking about?
I mean, you're thinking about all these beautiful things. Oh,
Thank you.
I mean, I have to be honest about.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Thank you.
I like spending time with people who thinks this way because we don't have many of you in countries like Ethiopia and elsewhere in Africa. But I assume you face problems every now and then.
Every day. Yeah, I mean, I'm human, aren't I?
Tell me about maybe 3 or 4 of those.
So challenges. It's like a new way in the world. You know, you come to a new place, you don't have any family. Yeah, you miss the holidays, you miss fellowship, you miss familiarity, you know. Have you ever lived anywhere else besides Ethiopia?
Yeah.
Have you ever been far away from your family for a very long time?
Not very long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it can be hard, you know. Sometimes, you know, you might have immigration challenges. Sometimes it's really hard for us to come to Ethiopia and stay, you know. And yeah, so I mean, I think at this point, if you would have talked to me maybe like 10 years ago, you know, I might have been able to give you a bit more of the crisis points or the things that we had to do in order to remain. You know, it wasn't easy. It was very challenging in the beginning to come to Africa. I came with my children. My youngest at the time was 1. He just turned 1 like a month before we moved. And, you know, I came to a new place. I didn't speak the language. I didn't know anyone. I just knew that I wanted to come to Ethiopia. And thankfully at the time, the United States government was had a relationship with Ethiopia that allowed us to get 2-year visa. So I came as like a 2-year tourist. So it allowed me to, the time to acclimate, you know, but it still was learning how to eat injera, learning how to socialize the way that, you know, is socially acceptable in Ethiopia. Is much different. Like here, you can go to anyone's house, and if it's lunch and they're eating, you're invited, you know. It's like you show up unexpected, there's always something for you. If I come during a mealtime, someone will bring me a plate. There's always welcome, there's always hospitality. But in the West, if you go to someone's house and they're eating dinner, they tell you to come back later, you know. So you're learning a whole different way of being, a whole different system of life, and the challenges that come with that. Coming with fitting into a new place and learning the language, what's socially acceptable, what's not. I think with Ethiopia, it's a learning curve, but that learning curve has become an everyday occurrence because Ethiopia doesn't stay one thing. Ethiopia has changed, multifaceted changes over this last almost decade and a half that I've been here. It's been constant learning, constant relearning. And it's a learning that I respect. It's a learning that I open my heart to because I want this for myself. I want this for my future. I want this for my children's future. So I embrace it. If I didn't embrace it, I would have left. If I didn't know how to face challenges, I wouldn't have stayed here as long as I've stayed. Because this has probably been the most challenging thing I've ever done with my life. You know, imagine returning to Africa. It's like your ancestors' wildest dream, you know? And something that if you're fully committed to, it's not like, oh, I think I'm going to go try it out, you know, see if it works. And if it doesn't work, then I'll go back. It's not like that. It's like, okay, I'm determined. It's like a determination. No matter what, I'm going to make this work because this is what I want for myself. That's a challenge in itself, you know? So, I mean, with the challenges of being here in Ethiopia, with the challenges of life, it makes you incredibly strong. And I'll tell you, like I told someone right before I came to this meeting today, I stopped at a place not too far away on the other side of Golakun. And I sat with the owner. We were sitting in the dark. They had some power outage. I was having a coffee. We were chatting. He also is French diaspora, Ethiopian diaspora, but from France, and came back here, started his own business. And we were actually talking about the challenges of returning, of really understanding what it means, how to be an Ethiopian, how to think like an Ethiopian, how to make decisions and maneuver in the country like you're not a foreigner, you know? And this is something that I shared with him because we were kind of exchanging, like, these are our experiences. And he said something to me, and I said to him, one of the things that I've realized about Ethiopia is a warrior's country. It's a country of warriors. Not only were they warriors, but they were victorious warriors. They were the warriors that were able to keep what everyone else lost. That's how powerful they were as warriors. So Ethiopia is a land of warriors. And if you're going to be in Ethiopia, you too have to become a warrior. Spiritually, you have to be a warrior. You can't be in Ethiopia unless you know how to be a warrior. And maybe gentle, but you must know how to defend. You must know how to stand up for yourself. You must know how to assert yourself, understand what's your position. What do you stand for? You know, you have to know that. Otherwise, this place is not for you. It's not for you. So yeah, building that warrior within is one of the challenges too.
You know, I have to say, I learned a lot. Like, thank you for the wisdom. Thank you for sharing the experience and the perspective. Also, the things that you shared and the perspectives that you actually elaborated are not the things, are not ideas I have of the country, I have of Africa, I have of even the Caribbean. So thank you for everything. But I'm thinking, like,
you want to go deeper.
Yeah.
Go dive. You know, I'm here. Listen, I can go as deep as you want.
We could do that a lot, but our audience will not get the time to take all of it at once.
Of course.
So,
of course,
if there is anything you want to say at last, you can say it. But you have to promise that this will be the first episode, but the other one will follow.
Yes.
At some point in the future, maybe in a year or less than a year.
I'd love that.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd love
if you have anything to say at last.
Oh, my closing remarks, I would say a lot of things, actually. It's important that African countries, African leaders understand how much we value Africa and want to contribute. That in order for us to be able to do that, there has to be an open door. There has to be a process that allows us to do that, that welcomes us home. Yeah. That creates an easier process for us to do that. Is right now, the challenges of repatriation throughout the continent are, well, one thing we have to realize before we even get into the depths of it is that we're still a pioneering generation. Yeah. Although this has been happening for many decades, it's never happened at the level of policy like it's happening now. Yeah. So it's only going to increase. The desire to come home is only going to increase. Even, especially with the changes in immigration law in the West. The U.S. has changed its immigration policy towards Ethiopians and many other African countries also. And the Caribbean also, so there's been a lot of deportations. There's been a lot of, forced removals of people from the United States back to their countries of origin. So there's a tide changing and a redirection to the African continent. not just for us, but for people in general, because this is where the new opportunities are going to be opening. So that we have to create a system, a process through which we're welcome home to invest, to give back, to contribute, that don't put us in the same bracket as Europeans and Indians and Chinese, because we're Africans' children. We're different than every other culture, community, and race. And we shouldn't be penalized because of where we were taken to as slaves. Yeah, we were taken to the Caribbean, we were taken to the United States. We didn't opt to go to these places. And so we shouldn't be penalized in our desire to return by being given this category of origin, because that's not really our origin. That was the plantation where we were when we received our freedom. Yeah. So we should be given special exemptions, special privileges that aren't afforded to the Europeans and the Indians and the Chinese when they want to come and invest and develop Africa. We need to be given a special process. And I think that part of the lobbying that we want to do, part of the interaction that we need to have with not only Ethiopian governments, but the African Union, is to figure out that process. You know, what does that process look like in the long term? Because 100 years from now, the things that we're doing now, the policies that we're making now, are what our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren are going to have access to. And that's why I call us a pioneering generation. We're not pioneers like on a farm, you know, or like on the Oregon Trail where everybody went west and sought gold and riches. Not that type of pioneer. We're a pioneer in policy, a pioneer for laws that need to be put in place so that coming generations can return home with greater ease than we did. You know, because we carved out a place for ourselves with our bare hands, with our grit, with our blood, with our sweat, with our tears. We sacrificed, you know, and we sacrificed so that our next generation wouldn't have to. Yeah. So we want to make that process easier. So to encourage that, not only your listeners, but politicians, leaders, lobbyists, people all over the world understand how important it is to address this issue before it becomes an even greater issue. Yeah.
Thank you. Really, thank you. I mean, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this
I
has
really
been
appreciate
amazing.
it. Wow.
Wow.
I really appreciate our conversation.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. Thank you for asking those poignant questions and for taking my thoughts seriously into consideration and opening someone like me for your platform. I truly appreciate the invitation.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right.